Good morning, everyone. My name is Chad Pierce, and I'm a Revenue Examiner for the Department of Revenue Services. Welcome to the Sales and Use Taxes webinar in relation to landscaping and horticultural services. Just a presentation disclaimer, the information in this presentation is intended to provide general information for taxpayers and tax practitioners. It is not intended to explain in-depth current department policy or practice. The information contained in this presentation is not intended to supersede, alter, or otherwise change provisions of the Connecticut General Statutes, regulations, department rulings, or tax guidance. Landscaping services defined. Landscaping services may be subject to use tax as a service to real property under Connecticut General Statutes 12-407A37I. Services to industrial, commercial, or income-producing real property, including but not limited to such services as management, electrical, plumbing, painting, and carpentry, provided income-producing property shall not include property used exclusively for residential purposes in which the owner resides, in which contains no more than 3 dwelling units, or a housing facility for low and moderate income families and persons owned or operated by a nonprofit housing organization as defined in subdivision 29 of section 12-412, or an enumerated service under Connecticut General Statute 12-407A37V, which is landscaping and horticultural services. As stated above, the services to real property does not state new construction or owner-occupied residential services, with landscaping and horticultural services being an enumerated service. It is taxable for new construction, owner-occupied residential property, existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. Landscaping and horticultural services. These services include, but are not limited to, just a few examples that we do have are the planting of and caring for flowers, fruits, trees, shrubs, and vegetables. Also services to lawns such as fertilizing, mowing, mulching, raking, seeding, and weeding. And lastly, the maintenance of exterior or interior plants such as pruning, spraying, tree removal services, tree trimming, or other lawn and garden services. One thing to think about if you're unsure if it's a landscaping service is basically anything that you're doing to beautify a property or make it look nice. That is going to fall under the landscaping service. As previously mentioned, lawn and gardening services such as weeding, mulching, fertilizing, raking, watering, and mowing are included in landscaping and horticultural services. Lawn and gardening services are both included. The term lawn on both the residential and non-residential property, as well as golf courses. One thing that doesn't come up very often, but did want to note that here is a casual sale is not taxable. So a casual sale would be somebody who is not in the trade of landscaping, but they do maybe service 3 or fewer yards per year. That wouldn't be a taxable service. This isn't going to matter much to landscapers because as a landscaper, you are in the trade of landscaping. So you wouldn't be able to just choose 3 jobs that wouldn't be taxable. This is going to be from somebody who does not engage in landscaping as their main trade. And if they do 3 or fewer residents per year, those would not be taxable. So excavating, land clearing, and rough grading services performed as part of landscaping are taxable. If these services are being done as an integral part of landscaping, they're going to be taxable. One thing to think about is if you are excavating, land clearing, and rough grading with the intent to then put down hay and fertilizer to grow grass for a lawn, that is going to be a landscaping service, so that will be taxable. Also, an example below is irrigation, sprinkler, and sprinkler systems. So same thing, if you're excavating, land clearing, and rough grading to put in a irrigation or sprinkler system, that is going to be a taxable service. And then some other ones listed below are patios, walkways, and driveways, other than poured concrete and asphalt. One thing to note is if you were putting down decorative stones or pavers that may have been made out of poured concrete or asphalt, that is still going to be deemed landscaping, which would be taxable. The construction, remodeling, or repair of ponds, fences, gates, and walls, other than walls that are part of the structure of a building, are presumed to be landscaping services until the contrary is established. One thing to note, how it states other than walls that are part of the structure of a building. Two examples I like to give is a chimney and then your front steps. Those are going to be attached to the structure of a building and is not going to be considered a landscaping service. So examples we have below that are pretty good ones that we do see is a service provider installing a fence around a swimming pool in order to comply with a law requiring that swimming pools be enclosed, can establish that the services performed are not landscaping services. So if you're putting a fence around a pool because you have to, because that's the law, that's going to be different than you just putting a fence around your property. The fence on your property is going to be a landscaping service where you're beautifying your property with that fence, whereas the fence around the pool is being done because it has to be done. Another example is building a retaining wall that's required by a city or town is not a landscaping service. That's going to be required, so that is not landscaping. But if you wanted to build some kind of wall to, like I mentioned before, beautify your property, that is going to be a landscaping service. Another example is the construction, remodeling, or repair of chain link fences and fences to contain livestock on a farm are not considered landscaping services. The non-landscaping services are not taxable when performed on new construction or owner-occupied real property, but they are taxable if performed on existing industrial, commercial, or income-producing property. So a lot of landscapers don't realize this, and this is something that I've seen doing quite a few sales and use tax audits of landscapers, is as a landscaper, you can purchase on a resale basis all the materials that will be physically incorporated or physically applied to the premises of the service recipient in the delivery of landscaping and horticultural services. So if you were doing a landscaping service where you are putting down mulch, planting different shrubs or trees, one thing to note is everything that you are doing for that job and leaving at the job, you can buy on resale. So when you go to actually buy the materials, you can give a resale certificate where you will not pay tax when you purchase those materials. When you go and physically install those materials, such as, like I said, shrubs or edging and mulch, and you leave the job site and you leave those materials there, those can be bought on resale. Anything that you're taking away from the job wouldn't qualify to be purchased on resale, and you would have to pay the tax on those. One thing to note is then when you go to bill or invoice the customer, you must collect tax on the labor, installation, and the materials when the service is performed on new construction, owner-occupied residential property, existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. Since you are not paying tax on the materials when you purchase them, they are going to be included in the total bill when you're collecting tax for those materials. For brickwork and stonework, this is with a lot of masonry contractors. In a sense, they're kind of wearing two hats where they can be working as a masonry contractor or they can be working as a landscaper. So in this slide, this is related to the structure installation. So In this case, they're going to be acting as a masonry contractor where they're going to pay tax on the purchase of materials for the construction of chimneys, interior and exterior surface of the building, and fireplaces, including but not limited to bricks, stone dust, stone, mortar, and cement. When completing these jobs, the contractor does not collect tax when installing the items above in new construction or owner-occupied residential property, but the contractor must collect tax when installing the items above in existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. When the contractor is collecting tax, they're just collecting tax on the labor, not on the materials. The reason why is because when they're purchasing these materials, they're already paying tax on them. So they're not going to go ahead and then charge tax on them again when they're completing the job. They're just going to collect tax on labor, like I said below. One is to existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. Services such as waterproofing, repairing, repointing, and fixing cracks in brick structures follows the rules for installation. Now, in this example of brickwork and stonework, we have related to landscaping, such as the installation of walkways, walls, and patios, other than asphalt, tar, macadam, or poured concrete. So just like the example of the landscape we're doing a mulch bed, in this example, the contractor purchases all the materials, including but not limited to brick, stone, mortar, and stone dust that will be physically incorporated into the project without payment of tax by issuing a resale certificate to the vendor. So when they go ahead and complete this job, they're going to buy all of the materials on resale. And then when they actually complete the job, the contractor must collect tax on the labor and materials to install when the service is performed on new construction, owner-occupied residential property, existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. Like I said before, they are going to be charging tax on the materials because they're going to be buying them on resale. So when they purchase them, they will not be paying tax, but when they do invoice the customer, there will be tax on the entire invoice, including the materials. So decks are not landscaping. They are a service to real property. This was added in here because if a general contractor hires a bunch of subs to do some kind of landscaping around a house or a business, a lot of times it is going to include decks, but that does not mean that decks are a landscaping service. So for completing decks, the contractor is going to pay tax on the purchase of materials, including but not limited to lumber and building supplies. The contractor does not collect tax when performing carpentry services to new construction or owner-occupied residential property, but the contractor is going to collect tax on the labor when performing carpentry services to existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. And just to note, they're not going to be collecting tax on materials no matter where it's performed, because when they buy the materials, they're going to be paying tax on them. Dredging and ponds. This is something that we do not see a lot, but it's good to note that dredging services are performed to create or maintain a certain depth in bodies of water. Dredging includes excavation of earth to reach the water line and removal of excavated or dredged material. Dredging does not include services provided to piers or docks. Dredging of privately owned ponds, lakes, streams, or inland wetlands. Dredging to reconstruct, remodel, or repair privately owned ponds and dredging of existing privately owned ponds, lakes, streams, or inland wetlands are taxable services. Dredging of existing privately owned ponds, lakes, streams, or inland wetlands are taxable maintenance services, even if the body of water is navigable. These dredging services are taxable when performed on new construction, owner-occupied residential property, existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. You will note in that last paragraph it states our taxable maintenance services. So I just wanted to go over some taxable maintenance services that we do see a lot. Some of those are gutter cleaning, snow plowing, or power washing a house. These are not landscaping services and are all maintenance services to real property, which are taxable. One thing to note, especially with landscaping and living in Connecticut, is a lot of landscaping will be done in spring, summer, and fall. And then in the winter, due to the weather, there isn't a lot of landscaping services being done. A lot of the landscapers, what they do in the winter is snow plowing. So snow plowing is a maintenance service to real property and is taxable. It is not landscaping. Also, when snow plowing, a lot of times these landscapers are purchasing sand and salt to put down. Sand and salt cannot be purchased on resale, and when the landscaper buys it, they should be paying tax on it. Excavating, grading, and land clearing. So if it's not related to landscaping, the contractor does not collect tax when performing these services on new construction, owner-occupied residential property, and the contractor must collect tax when performing these services on existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. If it is related to landscaping, they're going to collect tax when they're performed on new construction, owner-occupied residential property, existing commercial property, existing industrial property, and existing income-producing property. One way to kind of differentiate this is if it's not related to landscaping, it's probably going to be for building roads or for building some kind of building. That's not going to be related to landscaping. Whereas if they're prepping to put down, like I said before, hay and seed for a lawn, that's going to be related to landscaping and is going to be taxable. Just one other thing to note is land clearing is not taxable. So basically, if you're clearing land with nothing planned, that is not going to be a taxable service. Landscape architectural services. The functions normally involved in landscaping or horticultural services are taxable no matter who provides the services. However, services performed by a licensed civil engineer or landscape architect are not taxable as landscaping and horticultural services if those services are normally considered to be part of civil engineering or landscape architecture. Some examples are site assessment and analysis, environmental impact studies, master planning, preparation of wetland approval packages, hydraulic analysis, preparation of site layout or utility layout, preparation of storm water management plans, preparation of design development drawings, preparation of site plan approval packages, and preparation of site construction drawings. So like I stated above, usually no matter if it's going to be a landscape or horticultural services, it's going to be taxable. But in this case, it won't be. So if it's by a licensed civil engineer or a landscape architect, it's not going to be taxable as landscaping. One thing to note is basically every example that I read below, these are all jobs that are being done before the actual landscaping is being done. It's kind of like in the pre-stage of the landscaping job. Those are all going to be architectural services that are not going to be taxable. Getting starting in business, depending upon the business structure you choose, you will need to file certain tax forms to report your business income. Visit business.ct.gov, an online one-stop shop where you can find information required to start up or manage your business in Connecticut. Business.ct.gov includes a customized checklist tool to guide you through starting a new business in Connecticut, a virtual assistant to answer your general information questions, and more. Visit the DRS website for more information on starting your business. Registering with DRS. Contractors, including subcontractors, must obtain a Connecticut sales and use tax permit from DRS prior to providing any services in Connecticut, even if the services provided are not taxable or if the contract is with a tax-exempt entity. One thing to note on that is if you are providing a service that is not taxable or with a tax-exempt entity, you still have to file the returns. So if it's not taxable, basically what you would do is you would still fill in the amount of gross receipts that you received in that period, and then you would just take a deduction for that set amount, and then you'd end up with a zero return when no taxes due, but you do still have to file. Also, if you're registered and you don't do business that month, you can just put in all zeros. To register a business, visit MyConnect, and in addition to obtaining a sales and use tax permit, a non-resident contractor is required to meet requirements imposed on such contractors. So non-resident contractors would have to become verified, and there is a way to do that, to be verified for 2 years as a non-resident contractor. Service charge. The service charge includes the actual labor charge, any markup of profit on labor, any markup on profit on materials, overhead expenses, tool or equipment purchases or rental, including tax paid on the rental, and reimbursed expenses incorporated into the bill, whether or not the charges are separately stated. As a landscaper, this is important because, like I mentioned before, you can buy materials on resale, and then when you go to invoice the customer, you are going to charge tax on the entire invoice. This is what the invoice should be made up of when you go to bill that to your customer, and just remember to charge tax on the entire invoice. Submitting Form OS-114, Connecticut Sales and Use Tax Return on MyConnect. Connecticut Sales and Use Tax Return must be filed for every reporting period, even if no tax is due or no business activity was conducted for a particular period. So like I said before, if no business was conducted, just go in there and file zeros. If business was conducted but no taxes due, just make sure you list the gross receipts from the services provided during that period, and then you would just take a deduction if it was tax exempt for the same amount to get to a net zero return. Taxpayers are responsible for filing a timely return, whether they are monthly, quarterly, or an annual filer. This is going to be based on the amount of tax that you report to DRS. It's not something that you can pick and choose. The due date for filing Form OS-114 is the last day of the month following the end of the reporting period. If a return is filed late and a payment of taxes is due, there will be additional charges for penalty and interest. Additional resources, we have the Taxpayer Education Center. There are DRS Tax Events Calendar and the New Business Resource Center. One thing I have to tell a lot of contractors that I deal with for sales and use tax audits is to really review that Connecticut Contractors Guide. There is information on just about any service that you're going to be providing, and it definitely does have information in regards to landscaping, and then also if you were completing a deck or any masonry work like was included in this webinar, it will have information on that as well. Subscribe to the DRS Tax Topics newsletter. DRS is committed to providing timely and helpful information to Connecticut taxpayers and tax practitioners. So DRS embarked on the development of a communication tool. The DRS Tax Topics newsletter is a quarterly newsletter that provides general information for taxpayers and tax practitioners. It includes department news, seasonal topics, upcoming educational events, and more. If you scan that QR code on the screen, that will help you subscribe to the DRS Tax Topics newsletter. The DRS contact information, you can call by phone at 860 297-5962. Also email drs@ct.gov. And you can also use the MyConnect website to contact the department. You can go on there and ask questions, and then an examiner can answer that question right there on the MyConnect site for you to see. You can also follow DRS on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and YouTube for updates that are going on throughout the year. And then lastly, if anyone within this webinar wants to ask questions, you can use the Q&A on the screen. Looks like there are some in here now, so I'll go through them. Will this slide deck be available after this session is over? Yes. After the recording, it will be available in about a week's time on the Taxpayer Education Center. What would be considered new construction? So any new building starting from the ground up. If you're unsure, there is a Cert 104, which is our new construction certificate, which would help verify if it was exempt or not. And to follow up on that, if it is a new construction, what deduction do you use? There is a deduction for non-taxable labor and services that you can use. One thing to note is when filing your return and taking deductions, just make sure that you always have a backup to verify where those numbers are coming from and where the deduction is coming from if it was ever reviewed. If we're subbing out a paving job for a client on their owner-occupied residential property, which is not taxable, would we have to pay tax on our markup, or is it not taxable since the whole service isn't taxable? If the whole service isn't taxable, there wouldn't be tax added on to the markup. If it's going to be a non-taxable job, then it would just stay non-taxable. Let's see, there's some more coming in. If I pay tax on materials and charge my customer, can I take a deduction on the OS 114? No, so if you pay tax on the materials, it depends on what the service being provided is. You shouldn't pay tax on materials for landscaping services because you're going to be charging them the customer tax because you're going to be buying it on resale. But you can't take a deduction if you pay tax on materials. And if you're a contractor, you should be paying tax on materials and then not charging the customer for tax on materials. You're just going to be charging for tax on the labor if it is a taxable job. If a landscaper pays tax on materials, then they do not tax the customer. You don't want to have, there doesn't want to be double taxation, so you don't want to pay tax on materials and then charge the tax to the customer. But really, as a landscaper, like stated before, you should not be paying taxes on materials. You should be buying them on resale and then charging tax to the customer. How do you get a resale certificate? The resale certificate is right on the Connecticut DRS website. There's actually a page that lists all of the certificates, and the resale certificate is one of them that is listed on there. Penalties for not filing or collecting tax. So if you file a return and let's see. Yeah, so penalties can be imposed for not filing or collecting tax. It depends what penalty is put on, but it's going to be percentage on the tax due. see. Is drainage excavation work non-taxable, both materials and labor? That's going to be depend, like I said in the webinar, is the excavation being done for a landscaping service or a non-landscaping service? If it is for a landscaping service, then yes, that is going to be taxable. If the contractor is doing snow removal and gets tax-exempt salt and sand, they are to charge the customer for that material. The contractor should just be charging tax for the service that they're doing. They shouldn't be charging tax on the sand and salt. They should be paying tax when they purchase that. Do you know when did excavating and landscaping become taxable? I do not, but I can find out and let you know. Let's see. When reporting our sales and use tax collected, there are 3 categories: services, goods, and something else. Do we have to separate what is materials and what is labor, or is everything under service because we tax the whole bill? So as a landscaper, when you're taxing the whole bill, you can just put it all under services. You wouldn't have to split it up, but like I said, it's good when you're filing these returns to just make sure you have a backup to everything. So if it was ever looked at, the department would know exactly why that is being reported and the tax that is being reported with it. If I was building a shed on existing property, would it be considered a new building or would it be considered owner occupied existing property? That one I'm going to note and I will get back to you. The resale certificate is issued to us or we file and present to the supplier. So you will fill out the resale certificate. You want to make sure that when filling it out, it is filled out properly and completely. And you want to make sure that the service that you're providing and what you're purchasing from the supplier align with one another. Can you explain the salt and sand tax rule for snow management work? Even though it's left at the site, it cannot be bought for resale and taxed at time of service. So as snow management, you are no longer considered a landscaper, even if that's what you do throughout the rest of the year. Snow plowing is maintenance, and therefore you cannot buy salt and sand on resale and then tax at the time of service. For new construction, what document is needed? There is a Cert 104, which is the new construction exempt certificate. So in case you paid taxes when purchasing the materials and I charge the customer said taxes, how do I claim an exemption for that so that I don't pay double tax? Well, moving forward, you're going to have a resale certificate and you're going to give that to the supplier when you're purchasing them. But I will reach out in regards to this question and get an answer for you for right now. Purchasing plant materials at wholesale cost, then charging customer an upcharge to guarantee the plant for 1 year. Do we charge tax on the wholesale cost of the plant, or whatever we charge, which could be twice the amount? So as a landscaper, you're going to charge tax on the entire bill. So the tax is going to be on whatever is on that bill. So if it is twice the amount, then tax is going to be on that. If drainage work is not taxable, do I need to file every month and it's always zero? Yes, you do have to file every month. Can we get a copy of this presentation? In about a week's time, this will be on the education website for you to review. Are landscapers taxable or non-taxable on buying construction supplies like pipe and fittings? You have to make sure what service you're doing. If it's definitely a landscaping service, then you can buy it on resale and charge tax on the entire thing. Um, if it's not considered landscaping, you're going to pay tax on the materials and then only charge tax on the labor. Is there an owner-occupied residential certificate for construction as well? I don't believe so, but I know a lot of times this is just verified by looking at the address to see if it is residential property. If snow is not a landscape service, but it is a taxable maintenance service, why is sand and salt taxable to the provider? So sand and salt is going to be taxable. You cannot buy that on resale. I know there's the argument that it's being left at the property, but that is not something that can be bought on resale. Do I have to declare cash jobs? Yes. All jobs, no matter how they're being billed, will have to be declared. Is landscaping services exempt in new construction, and do I need a builder to sign off on Cert 104? So in one of the previous slides below, it does talk about this, and landscaping is still taxable even at new construction. As a supplier, how do we know if they are landscapers or not? Um, One thing to do, because technically you can't really ever know, but you want to verify that the exemption cert they give you is filled out properly with a tax registration number. You can ask for their sales and use tax permit if you're a little skeptical about it, and then just make sure what they're buying for you is for landscaping. If they're coming to a department store and buying sheetrock as a landscaper, that's not going to make any sense. But if they're buying plants or mulch, then you can go ahead and assume that they are a landscaper. So the Taxpayer Education Center is on the DRS website. I'll just give it another minute or two and see if we have any other questions coming in. The filing is due at month end. Do you file by the last day of the month or the first day of the following month? So for January, we'll say you're not going to be expected to file February 1st. It's going to be the last day of the following month. Please clarify the taxation on snow plowing. We can purchase salt from a vendor and pay taxes. Can we charge the customer tax on the salt? You're going to pay tax on the salt and sand, and then you're going to charge tax to the customer on the service that you provide. Taxpayer Education Center, can you get there via MyConnect? No, you cannot. You have to go out to the DRS website, but here is the direct link. If you see that question there with the comment, you can click on that link to pull up the Education Center. Okay, so that will be it for today. Following this webinar, you will receive a survey for any ideas for upcoming webinars and feedback that you have on this webinar. The recording of this will be available in about a week's time on the Taxpayer Education Center. Thank you.